not only am I entering my second year in Indiana swimming, and as we talked about with the collegiate licensing part of this, my most important job is a dad. And so last week was our spring break, and we loaded our 13-year-old, our 7-year-old into the family truckster and headed down to Fort Myers Beach as we do every year. Spent a week down there and drove back yesterday, leaving Fort Myers at 8:30 in the morning, spending 9 wonderful hours in the state of Georgia trying to escape, and finally making it into Fishers, Indiana at 5:30 a.m. Sunday. So appreciate the accommodations that you made to get me in. But driving back from Florida, you really noticed in thinking about this presentation some of the cool brands and some of the strong brands that are out there in the marketplace. When you look at Waffle House, you look at Ruby Falls. I mean, I remember as a kid driving to Florida every year, and the number of times you would count every barn, every sign, every fence post would see Ruby Falls and see Rock City. I was disappointed to see for my kids that they didn't get to experience the same thing of counting the 127, I think it was, we made it one year, of those advertisements for that tourist location. You know, when you see Cracker Barrel, you know when you walk into a Cracker Barrel, no matter where it is in the country, you're walking into a country store, you're walking into biscuits and gravy, you're walking into fresh juices, a smiling person, and a great breakfast, and most importantly for those travelers, a clean restroom. Waffle House, if Jessica's still here from Georgia, how many different ways are there? There's 8 different ways, smothered and everything else that they have with that. Those folks who attend those places, they know what they're getting when they go there. So branding is very important when it comes to identifying what you are as a club, as an entity, as a corporation, or as a team. So let's go take a step back. What is a brand? Well, the American Marketing Association defines brand as a name, a term, a design, symbol, or any other feature that identifies one seller's good or service as distinct from another. And that's the key part of this right here. You want to make sure it's distinct from somebody else. You know, the legal term for what a brand is a trademark. So you'll hear, as Jim talked about, I was in the collegiate trademark industry where we protected and promoted brands of colleges all across the country. And that key protection piece is something that we'll talk on a little bit later. So one of the things that we would encourage you to do as you're going through and listening to this today is to sit back and ask some questions of yourself. You know, how do I view my brand? You know, does my logo identify who our team is, and is it recognizable? If I showed it to someone in our community, are they going to know right away who this club is and who this logo represents? You know, does the logo appeal to kids 6 to 18? Do they want to wear it? You know, one of the best advertisements that you have are the walking billboards that your kids wear when they go to school, when they go to camps, when they go to friends' houses. That's the best, cheapest, most economical way to promote your clubs, and I think we'll talk about that in some of the other presentations going forward, is how do we promote and how do we grow our clubs in our local communities. Is the use of our logo consistent, or do we use multiple different marks? And what we mean by that there is, when we have our logo, is it always the same color? Is it always look the same? Or do we allow people to take slight variations? One of the things that I've experienced working on with parent boards is that everybody's an expert when they make it to or elected to your board. They all know more than what they probably do. Some do, some don't. But they also know what's best for you based on their limited time with that organization. And you'll see folks who want to tweak it or change it or add an outline or let's add a new color. All of that stuff goes back to what is your brand at its core and how strong do you want it to be. The more alliterations and the more variations you have of it and the more times you let people take liberties with it, the more times you're going to weaken that overall core concept behind that brand. And lastly, and this is one when it actually comes to production and usage, do I have my logo in a vector format that can be easily used in different applications? That means, is it something that I can take to a screen printer, and can that screen printer produce it right away, either as an embroidery file on the left chest, or on a hat where it's got to be small, or can they blow it up to be a big full chest size without harming the integrity of the mark? So that's something that we'll hit on as well. So as we look at how strong our brand is, there's 4 corporate brands up there right now. I don't think I need to tell you who any of those 4 are, because everyone in this room knows who those 4 companies are. They're very consistent with their message. That you know when you walk in, you know what Apple is. You know outside of Coke's little dalliance with New Coke, however many years ago that was, they've been very consistent across the board with who they are. McDonald's, you know you're going in to get a cheap economical meal, clean place, it's going to be served to you fast. And then of course Nike and everything that they've done. Every one of those companies may have done slight variances and slight tweaks to their mark, but at their core, their logos have stayed the same. So how strong is my brand? So let me just we'll take it and we'll look at it from a sports standpoint. I'm going to put 3 logos on the board. You guys obviously should be able to name who each one of these are. So the first one is, second one is, and the third one is. All right, so each one of these brands themselves, the Dallas Cowboys star is iconic in the NFL. As a Bears fan, I absolutely hate it. It makes my skins crawl every time I see it. But nonetheless, they've done a fantastic job of identifying who they are, and the pride to play for the quote-unquote star is something that they've done very well. Chicago Cubs, that C is something that they've used for hundreds of years. They've done variations with it, with the Cubbies, with cursive, with different marks, with the bear outside of it, but at their core, their brand is that C. Michigan, I put them up there because they're unique. That's not Michigan's logo, but if you aren't from the state of Delaware, if I show you that winged helmet, you're going to know exactly who that school is and who that team is. They've done it. It's a phenomenal job that they've done building that brand so that people across America, regardless of whether you're a college football fan or not, you know who that is. And that's something to be proud of them that they've done such a great job of building that identity to the point where they haven't varied from it, they haven't changed it, they haven't tweaked it. If you ask, one of our previous clients that I worked with very closely was the Big Ten Conference, and I had a very good relationship with all those schools, and the dalliances back and forth between Columbus and Ann Arbor are quite well known, and Ann Arbor will point out to you how their helmet has never changed, but yet Ohio State seems to change theirs a little bit every year with new paint colors, new stickers, and everything like that. So it's just kind of funny how that goes back and forth. So one of the questions that people will ask is it time to freshen up my brand? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some examples from the collegiate space and kind of give you some ideas of this. This first one, if anybody here is from the state of Tennessee, anybody know who that might be? That was it's an old line drawing. That was their primary mark. And for a number of years, this was a cleaned up version of the Austin Peay Governors. As you can see, the difference is nothing's wrong with that logo on the far right, except for the fact that if you try to replicate that into a small embroidery file, or you try to replicate that into some other items that are different in size, you're going to potentially lose some of that detail, which evidently harms the integrity of the mark. By going to the new, more modern look, it's something that I think more kids, college-age kids especially, are going to identify for. I don't know how many people are going to want to play for the old gentleman on the right, but the new guy on the left, a little bit tougher, a little bit more aggressive. For our friends from Nebraska, once again, classic old retro logo. Nothing is wrong with this mark, and actually there's a marketplace for this that's kind of coming back, as you see at retail, for clubs and for teams that are using it. But that's the old Creighton Blue Jay. This is the new Creighton Blue Jay. Once again, cleaned up, a little bit more profound lines, highlight some of the colors, easier for them to replicate in bigger or smaller formats as far as screen printing and embroidery. So that's kind of a college thing, and there's multiple examples here. I didn't want to waste a lot of time on colleges, and as this is not a canned presentation. So if you guys got questions at any time, you want to stop, raise a hand, by all means, we can discuss anything along those ways. Next one I'm going to kind of show up, since everything else in this place seems to involve Southeastern Swim Club, we're going to involve them as well on this. So I'm going to show you two different club logos from the same town in the state of Indiana. First one I'm going to show you is Southeastern Swim Club. This was their original mark. Hamilton County, where they're located, is a square. Southeastern's obviously the southeastern quadrant of that square. This was their primary mark. You guys can chime in if I'm missing any of the details, but this is the brand that they carried with going forward. Some of the problems that they have, and one of the things that we would look at when we walked into a college bookstore to evaluate a college brand, we would ask 3 questions. If I walked into that college bookstore and I can't tell you what their primary color is, what their nickname is, or what their school name is, and what their mascot is, I needed to answer those 3 questions. If I could go into that store and I could answer those 3 questions, that school's probably done a pretty good job of building their brand. If they weren't, if you walked in and it was a rainbow of colors and it just was an arch logo, arch name here, there, you know that you're pretty confident in telling that bookstore manager that your sales are probably down or probably flat. That school president's probably not as excited about their identity and where they're going. So if we look at this logo here, and I think as you see the second one, you'll see the improvements that were made. Primary color for Southeastern Swim Club is what? Red. Nickname for the club is? All right. Southeastern Swim Club, actually the primary color is blue, and they're the Royals. This new iteration that they did, I think, speaks to that clearly, distinctly, and it's identifiable. And I think it also is something that a 6 to 18-year-old kid is going to be much more excited to wear the logo on the left than the logo on the right. I think we all would agree to that. Now, their logo that they did redrawn here, they had the benefit of having a parent on their club who has a graphics background. And that parent was able to redo it for them. I believe, what, Andy, you traded out, what, 4 years of membership for it? No, I'm just kidding. Was able to do it out of the goodness of their heart to get that done. Speaks to their blue color heritage, speaks to their Royals nickname. I think it's an outstanding job that they've done and made an improvement there. Second one is the Fishers Area Swimming Tigers, located in the same town. They're a driver 9-iron away from each other. This logo I can speak to a little bit more distinctly because this is the club that my kids swim for. When we came on board, or I came onto the board there were 7 versions of this one mark that we had as a file. So if you asked our head coach for the logo to do a flyer or a t-shirt or the website, you could get one of 7. Sometimes they had a shadow around it, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes 3 of the toes had a shadow, the 4th one didn't, and nobody ever caught anything. This was very inconsistently done, and it wasn't ever done to a professional level. So one of the benefits that it came with from what we did is I had some relationships with some designers in the collegiate space that allowed us to trade out some of those goodwill gestures that I had done from a business side, and for $500 we had a new family of marks created for FAST. The one on the far right takes the place of that word mark. The second one in speaks to the Tigers nickname, which is kind of the primary mark that the club uses now. The third one is the one that they use on swim caps and on uniforms or on swimsuits themselves. Stands out, it's a little bit more bold, don't have some of the fine details. And the last one was created at the urging of our head coach, who indicated that there were numerous FAST clubs across the country in different LSCs. And that when we went to a national level meet, we wanted people to know that we were the FAST club that was based in Indiana. So that's why that one is there, and it's used for those national meets that our kids would go to. So there's 2, like I said, there's 2 examples right there of different changes that can be made at different cost points. I would be willing to bet you, if you're looking at your own club right now, you've got a parent with a skill set that they can either attach you to somebody to get it done economically or even do it themselves. So something to think about there. To Marshall's point earlier with some of the trade outs, you know, there may even be an ad agency or somebody in town that you could trade a sponsorship out if you wanted to get this cleaned up. So just something to think about from along those lines. So the next question we talked about is, am I consistent with my brand? Now in Indiana, very proud LSC, but we have different teams that we'll send out. So we have a mid-states team. We have a 14 and under zones team. We send camps, elite camp groups out for both our age groupers and our senior swimmers. Every time we sent one of those entities out, we let our coaches design a cap or a logo for that event. So what we had is 4 different events, 4 different logos, none of which spoke to the core of what Indiana is. Our last example from our Mega Zone event that we hosted, because of the Olympic year, we had an Olympic variation with states of Indiana and the Olympic colors, so it looked like rings. Great, kids loved it. Kids never wore it again. So what we've done in Indiana for the next quad, going back to that Michigan helmet, is we're going to be consistent for the next 4 years that this is our cap, this is our gear that our kids are going to wear, and you're going to know who's in the pool with you when Indiana shows up. It's going to have the state flag on the one side, then the Team Indiana and what that event is that they're participating in on the other side. What we saw out of this that we did not anticipate, but it's been a great benefit, are the kids who qualified for this first mid-states team that we had. They wore those caps all year. They're still wearing them. It became such a badge of honor for them to have that it was something that we didn't assume that was going to happen. So it's been pretty cool to watch that as they go back to their club practices, as we visit different clubs, when we visit different meets. They're wearing those caps because they're proud. They know that's that badge of honor. The other thing they found out is they don't want to trade them either. They don't want to go to the meets and trade them with the different LSCs, which I thought was pretty cool as well too. So something to consistently think about there as you look forward in your plans. Let's be consistent with what we are. Let's create that pride behind it. Now, when we talk about rebranding, what are some of the questions and some of the things that you should look at with respect to rebranding? Number one, don't change a logo just for the sake of change. Take into consideration the history of that brand. There's a lot of equity in every one of our brands that are in this room right now. Every one of us. But that doesn't mean, like I said, that you want to just change for the sake of change. You want to appeal to your target demographic. You got a cool logo, you got great kids on your team, that's a popular club. That's a club that parents are going to want to have their kids be with, and that's one that from a peer pressure standpoint, kids are going to want to join. Make sure that that logo can be replicated in embroidery and screen printing. It doesn't do you any good to have the coolest, most fantastic logo that looks good on a website if I can't take it to a screen printer and to an embroidery shop and put it on my coach's polos, if my coaches all have to wear something different because there's too much detail in it. So make sure we're taking that into consideration as well. Know what your PMS color is. Now, PMS color is the number that a screen printer will use to match the color of ink to the color of your shirt or your logo. For example, with the Fishers example that was up there, their PMS 200, which is red. 189 is red. 201 is red. 201 is Oklahoma. 202, 203, there's 17 different variations of red. Now, if you're doing a one standalone, it doesn't make any difference. But if I order a shirt here, it comes back in 189, I order another shirt here and it's 200, and my swim cap comes back in 201, and all of a sudden I try to assemble and I put all those three together, now it doesn't look like I know what I'm talking about because I've got 3 different shades of red. So make sure that you're consistent with what your PMS color is, identify it and know it so that whoever your vendors are, they can do that. And they all have these books. I mean, it's a book, it's a little flip through like a paint chart. And you can go through and you can pick which one is yours that you want to use, and that color can be replicated by a printer if you're doing brochures. It can be replicated by a screen printer, and it can be matched up with a thread color from an embroidery standpoint. And that consistency, I think you'll find, helps eliminate any of the confusion that might be out there. And going back to that consistent, if you are changing your logo, you're going to have some things that have the old mark on it. It's too expensive for anybody to just wipe the slate clean. You're going to have kids who have swimsuits already bought. You're going to have kids who have warm-up suits. Parents don't want to spend another. I just bought Susie this. She's not going to grow out of this for 2 years. I'm not changing it. That's fine. No different than you are when you're changing from a Speedo to a tier or a tier to an arena. It takes some time to kind of phase some of that out. So develop a phase-out plan of at what time you want everybody in the new mark. Look at your score. You might have logos on the scoreboard, on the walls, different other areas. You can immediately change a website. That's easy. But some of the other ones, you might need a schedule. So make sure you have that schedule, and once you decide on it, stick to it. That's the biggest fault we'll see is people will slowly phase something out, and then they'll forget to do they'll kind of stall it out and drag it out a little bit. And when you do that, you'll lose some of the efficacy of that new mark and the new bang that you're going to get. Focus groups. Use focus groups if you are to help you decide on what the new brand should be. Use athletes. Get that kid's appearance in there. Use parents. Use coaches. Use board members. Whomever it may be, the only advice I will give to you is keep it small. If you've got more than 10 people, getting more than 10 people to agree on what a new logo should be is next to impossible. because everybody's got their mind of what they think is best. So make sure that you're using that core focus group. Keep it small, but make sure you're getting that input, because then you've got those buy-in and you've got those disciples in the field for you when you do launch the new mark. They're ready to rock and roll. If you do hire an outside firm, draw up a work for hire. If you need one, I've got one that I can send to you that's generic. But what you want to do there is just make sure that after you've paid somebody to create something for you, that they've turned over the rights to you and they no longer have a right. What you'll see is a lot of times, this may not happen necessarily at the club level, but at the college level, they'll hire a designer, they'll design this new logo, all of a sudden it takes off and becomes the most popular thing out there. And there becomes a large revenue stream that starts to produce from the apparel that gets sold. That designer has been known to come back and say, yeah, I want 2% of everything that you generated. That's mine. I created it. By having this work for hire in place, you've removed their ability to come back and make that claim. And lastly, consider trademarking your logo with your state's Attorney General's office. One of the things that you might be sitting out there right now and say, well, heck, I'm a W. My W's in my name with water. Wisconsin's got a great W logo. I'm just going to take their logo, change the color, no one's going to know any better. Probably right. But what you need to remember is that Wisconsin has developed and built that brand in the same way the Cowboys have, the same way that Apple has, and they own it. And they've registered it with the federal government. And by doing that, they have to actively enforce ownership of that logo on a consistent basis. And you will see 5, 6 times a year, high school ABC is being sent a cease and desist letter by some big bad college telling them that they can no longer use their logo. We had one at, when I was with SMA, Florida International University, Nice High School, I believe, is up in Jacksonville, where Tim Tebow played. And Nice took Florida International's Golden Panthers logo, verbatim, changed FIU to Nice, and that was their lark. And FIU said, no, we don't want you to use it anymore. And that high school came back and said, if you tell us to stop, we're no longer going to send any athletes to your school. So it was kind of played out in the media. It was fairly funny. And the school and the university said, absolutely not, we're not going to allow you to use it. Going back to that Wisconsin example, Wisconsin right now sends out 15 cease and desist letters every year to high schools around the country, telling them they need to stop using it. Ironically, the stronger your school is in athletics, the less likely you're going to get one of those letters because they don't want to offend the coaches in any way, shape, or form. So it's kind of a tit for tat there. But they have to do that by law, because when you think about it, when you've all gone to a college football game and the guy comes up in the black plastic bag and is like, hey, $5, I'll get you this t-shirt, it's great. And the shirt's going to fall apart because it's poor quality and everything else, but it's a counterfeit shirt. For them to be able to enforce against that person selling their product illegally, they've got to be able to show that they're protecting their logo. And if that counterfeiter goes into court and says, well, there's 200 high schools and 25 swim clubs using this logo, and they're not doing anything to them, that weakens their ability to defend that position that that's their logo. So that's the reason why some of that plays out. They're not always the bad guy. They're doing what they're supposed to do. So if you are going to create something, I would strongly suggest creating something that's unique to you. And if you decide to register it, do it at the state level. It costs $20 in most states. It doesn't really do a whole lot except show that your ownership of it. The most important thing you need to keep as the owner of a new mark is the day that that new logo went into circulation. The first day that a t-shirt came out with our new club logo on it, what day was that? Take a picture of it next to the newspaper, put it in your file. Because if you ever had to go to court to defend your ownership, regardless of whether side A registered with the federal government and you didn't, whoever can produce to that judge that they were the first one to use that mark in commerce, that's who wins the case every time. Case closed.